Okay, so our second topic is getting to know the guides. We thought we would talk about that. And for me, I feel that's an important topic, really, getting to know that bond and that blending with who walks with us. So, what's your understanding on that, Penny?
Yeah, so I think that when I first started on my journey to understand my non-physical senses and my abilities and all this talk about guides, I started getting curious.
Mm.
And then when I embarked on the path of trance, it became more and more important to me to understand the personality of the guide and their role. So I did spend time wanting to know and understand who they are and how they work with me, why they work with me. I had a gazillion questions. And of course, I realized I spent most of my time saying, help me with this, help me with that.
Yeah.
Help me, help me. And but I didn't really make the time and space to receive the answers.
Mm.
So I think that if it's important to you to understand your guide, and I think for trance in the foundation stages, it is a good idea because you can discern between what is you and your personality and your thoughts and what is the personality and thought influence from your guide. And I emphasize thought influence because in your earlier stages, it's more inspirational and influential as opposed to a control.
Yeah,
Uh,
absolutely. I think it's interesting because you sometimes some people think they're speaking from, with the guide being there, and actually it's coming from their own soul or their
mm,
subconscious mind. And I find that, like you said, in the early days, it can be more of that inspired state. And then as they
mm,
work on that connection with their guide, and for me, I think it's important to get to know the presence and the essence of the guide there, so that they can start to recognize that difference. I know for myself that was something that I went through a lot. Is it my mind? Is it the guide? Uh,
yeah,
and so we all go through that journey, don't we? And
yeah,
it really is a long journey, I feel, of recognizing what's you and what is the sensation or the feeling or that blending of the
mm,
spirit world starting to enhance that communication. So it's really interesting when we look at it and we take our time with it, because I think
yeah.
if we rush, then we're not we're not really given enough space, are we, for the communication to unfold?
Yeah, and it keeps the waters muddy,
Yes.
because and we can sort of fool ourselves into thinking that it's another intelligence that's working with us, and sort of talking about muddy waters. I think that with lockdown and everybody going online, it looked to me as though, and I'm trying not to be overly judgmental here, but it just appeared to me as though everybody was kind of held captive in their homes during the COVID era, and a lot of people decided they must be mediums and trance mediums and at that. And I think that that sort of self-professed um, putting a self-professed kind of persona out there isn't necessarily what it is.
No.
And so then of course people are finding all kinds of people out there, very good trance mediums to quite ordinary people who aren't really in a trance state.
Mm.
And it becomes confusing then. So maybe if people have a self-professed kind of um image of themselves and that connection to the spirit world, they will naturally look to those others similar to them out there and kind of go, yep, I'm amazing.
Mm,
So I think that there are some very tricky waters that we're in because there's so much available online, and here we are online talking about it. So
yes.
I think that we what's important to me, and I know it's important to you, is to constantly question,
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
not be satisfied at a particular level, and to push the boundaries and get confirmation after confirmation, so that you're not settling for something that you don't even know whether it's your higher self or your own soul or a spirit influence.
Yeah.
And I know you want to come in here, but there's one other thing I want to say, which is looking at the academic um, research side into spirituality. There is a large community that's growing where they are looking at people who channel,
Mm,
and that could be anything from their cat to an alien to another life form to a guide to um, their own parents and loved ones, etc. So this again, I think, creates a little bit of murky water because how the little researcher in me and the not and the healthy skeptic in me is like, well, how can we evidence that? How can they evidence that it is their cat or that it is an alien or that it is a fairy or Jesus? There's a
mm,
lot of people who believe that they are channeling deities, if you like. So how can we evidence that?
yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. I think, from what you're saying there, we've got to stay grounded, that
Mm,
feeling with it. And, I just feel that when you're exploring your trance, you have got to stay grounded. You've got to be sensible.
mm,
Well, you're moving into those layers of the mind, aren't you, that are quite sensitive and more awakened, and the imaginative side can get a little bit carried away if you don't
absolutely.
recognize how to move into that power, how to
Mm,
awaken that power, and blend with the guide and recognize those changes and those feelings.
mm,
And so definitely, I think it's important to always question, and
mhm.
I say when I'm teaching as well, I always say the importance of being honest. Did you feel that there was parts of yourself that was interfering with that? Did you feel the
Yeah.
guide there? And I think it's important those that are observing to recognize if they can also feel those changes. Can they feel the intelligence of the spirit world there? So I think it's very sensible to constantly question in a positive way, but it keeps us grounded, and I think we should really keep grounded with our trance, definitely.
I agree totally. And I think, that's something I've said a lot as well, being honest with yourself in any form of your mediumship or psychic work, because there is the the brain and the human mind within the mechanics of the brain is a tricky area.
Mm,
And we need to make sure that there is that through that grounding that you talk about, there is a, an honesty and a contemplation that reviews the experience and analyzes it, not to the nth degree where it destroys it, but at least looks at it with that integrity and honesty and to want to know for yourself for
yeah.
sure that there is something going on beyond your own thoughts,
Mm,
your own consciousness.
yeah. And I think you spoke about confirmation.
Mm,
That's another thing that I feel, a lot of people say you don't need to know your guides. You don't need to know, and I think everybody's going to have different understandings, different awarenesses with this. But from my experience, part of you wants to have that understanding of who works with you, and for me, it's been an ever growing bond and relationship with those that walk with me from the spirit side of life. And for me, they test you and they challenge you, and they give that confirmation when it's necessary,
Yes.
ready for it. I think
Yeah.
it's not about, right, I'm just going to sit to get to know my guide and then I want the confirmation straight away. I think we have to be patient with it, because I think there is a lot of that goes on. Well, I've sat, but why am I not getting the confirmation?
Yes, yeah. Well, I always say to people, you've got to create a date with the spirit world and keep the date, turn up, create the energetic space for them to come, and whether they feel their presence or not, whether they get the confirmation or not, they need to know that something is happening in that time and space that they create for the spirit world and their own soul. And there's more that happens behind the scenes than we realize. So it could be that the guides are there and they're doing some work while we're in that peaceful presence of our own soul, and they're able then to do whatever they need to do behind the scenes, see where we're at, really to delve into our own psyche and look to when we're ready. And then, maybe the next time or the time after that, that we create that date, create that energetic space, the spirit world will go, oh, now they're ready, and they'll give the answer. So it's something my own team told me, just because you think nothing's happened doesn't mean that we haven't been busy.
Exactly, and I think as well, a lot of it is to do with getting that right frequency, that right
Yeah.
energy, and the blending. And
Mm.
I think sometimes we forget how much the spirit world are doing. We sit and we say, oh, I want to feel the presence, I want it now, and we get impatient at times. But if you look back at pioneers of the past, they sat for years to understand
Mm.
the self, to understand the power, the importance of the soul. Um,
Mm.
and actually, sometimes you can sit and think, oh, well, nothing, they're not there, nothing's happened. But actually,
Mm.
like you said, they've been there in the background. They're looking to see what they can work with. And I think
Yeah.
we have to be that door. We have to put that work in to open that space, to allow that blend in, and to give them time to allow that to manifest and unfold.
Yeah, and I think also we have to recognize that there is an acceleration in learning and understanding and inherited um, spiritual understanding. I think we in modern times we also have to recognize things have moved on, and where the pioneers of the past sat for years, perhaps it's not so much years, but at least it still requires time and
Exactly.
space to be in the right frequency to allow
Hmm.
what's meant to happen. So, I think we can both recognize that there's an advancement in I think there are more and more and more people aware of their non-physical being,
Yeah.
and having a spiritual awareness of their own. So there's an acceleration there.
Mm.
But that doesn't mean to say that we just close our eyes and it all just comes out like an avalanche of amazing and meaningful, mind-blowing philosophy and world knowledge,
Yeah. Yes.
There's some steps in between that
Yeah.
too.
Absolutely. I think as well, it's discipline, isn't it?
Mm.
It's the art of discipline, and I feel it's routine as well. We're in such a busy world, and some people say, I really want to get to know the relationship with my guide, and I really want to work on this or that. And then you ask them, well, how much do you sit? What's your routine of sitting and putting that discipline in? And they're too busy. They're, oh well, I'm here on this day and I'm doing this on that day. And you think, well, if you don't put that time in, then how can the spirit world cooperate with you, and how can you cooperate with them? You see, so
Yeah.
it is a discipline, and like
And
you
a
said,
dedication, a
yeah,
dedication, y- it's like anything.
yeah,
I'm a middle-aged woman and I've got a middle-aged woman's belly. Now I can either go to the gym and jog every day and get rid of that with, a lot of hard work, or I can embrace the fact that I'm a middle-aged woman with a middle-aged belly, which is really hard to do. But if unless I put the effort in, I'm stuck with it. And I
yeah,
think that's the same about the spirit world. Unless you put the effort in, you're going to be stuck.
yeah,
And the thing is, people do constantly say, I want this, I want that. That's fantastic that you want it, but what are you doing to allow that to happen?
yeah,
What efforts are
yeah,
you putting into that? It doesn't just, I want $1 million, but it's not going to come to me. Well, pounds maybe. You
exactly.
know, what am I going to do to earn that?
Yeah, yeah. Wonderful. So, I think just looking at the time, and obviously we want to keep
Mm.
these sessions quite short.
Sure. Yeah.
But just to sort of finish, do you think there's any advice we could give about getting to know your guide? What can people do? Of course, put that time in to sit and get to know them. I think that's important. Um, but I think knowing yourself is important
Mm.
as well.
Oh, incredibly so.
Know
Yeah.
yourself. And I mean, this could go on forever, but we've got so many different layers to those altered states. And so it's recognizing where you are in that process so that you can then recognize who it is that's there with you. So,
Mm.
what would you
You know, I think looking at the fact that we're in a modern world and you know, there's a lot of distractions and the human attention span is pretty short compared to what it used to be. I think that if people can incorporate within their day 5 minutes to just stop and be present in their own soul, sprinkled throughout a day, that is way better than not doing anything at all. Oh, I'm really busy because I'm on my way here or there, or I've got this or I've got that. Sometimes you might arrive early somewhere. Sit in the car for 5 or 10 minutes if you're early
mm,
and just be present in your own soul, to work on those different layers, be present instead of thinking of what's next or what's happened.
yeah,
And
yeah,
and then it allows you in those moments that you do create the date with the spirit world to get into that presence
mm,
quicker
yes.
and to allow the spirit world to respond quicker.
Yeah. Would you say it's almost like a shift in consciousness, isn't it? And how
Mm.
we are
Yeah.
attuning ourselves with
Mm.
the spirit world, and where we are with that process. I just feel that, like you said, we live in such a modern world that to sit and stop and try and just calm the conscious mind, that's a biggie. That's a difficult thing
Oh,
in
yeah.
the Western world. It's
Well,
just,
most,
yeah,
sorry to talk over you, but most people's form of meditation is scrolling through Facebook or some app to find their love of their life, right?
yeah,
So what if they were to put down,
mm,
the phone or whatever it is and I find sometimes when I pick up my phone I'm mesmerized and all these reels start happening and then I have to snap
I
myself out
know,
of it. It's
I know,
like they suck you in.
yeah,
What if you just put the device down in those 5 minutes that you've got and just stopped and focused on your breath
mm,
and just was present? I think it's life changing.
yeah, absolutely. I think, could you
Mm.
imagine if you said to yourself, just for a couple of days, I'm going to have no phone? I wonder if people could do that as a challenge.
People have withdrawal symptoms, I think.
They do, yeah. It's really interesting, but I think it's how our behaviours got so almost addicted to it, and I think
Yes.
it'd
Mm.
be interesting to just say, right, just pop your phone down for a day and let's
Mm.
just sit and be more mindful.
Well, I can remember being addicted to sitting for spirit.
Yeah.
So, it can work both
It
ways.
can,
But
absolutely. Yeah.
yeah, I don't know. What advice would you give people before we finish off?
I would say, really, like you say, just sitting, take that time away from your phone. I think that's a big important thing. And
Mm.
we're all guilty of it. We all sit there and scroll and, look at an email, look at this, look at that. But I think if we can just find that time to prepare our mind before we then actually sit, I think that's important, because I find a lot of people go straight into sitting. They'll say, right, this is my intention and I'm going to sit. And then they find their
Mm.
conscious mind is coming in and out constantly. So
Yeah.
for me, I feel it's always important to look at how you're being more mindful, how you're, first of all, looking at the meditative mind, perhaps, how
Mm.
calm yourself, like you say, put the phone down and just have that time of moving into that space of oneness, and how good it feels to do that.
Yeah.
And
And
then from
mm,
there, I think it's important to just let go and relax. I think we put too much pressure on ourselves.
yeah.
The spirit world are there, but I think it's just how we adjust our consciousness to become aware of them. So I would say just giving yourself that time to truly relax, even if it takes 15 minutes, to just get your
Mm.
mind still and calm, to then adjust it to the spirit world.
Yeah, and it gets better the more you do
Yeah.
it. But
Yeah.
also, I think, what can be good for people is to do walking meditations.
Yeah, that's good.
A lot of people have dogs and need to take
Yeah,
them for a walk. So move into that meditative mind when you're walking. Don't be like, looking around and this and that and on your phone and, yanking the dog along or whatever it is, be mindful, do a walking meditation.
absolutely. I
Mm.
was working with somebody the other day, and um, sometimes some people find it difficult to sit in meditation,
Mm.
go on that journey to get to know their guide. So we just did it in more of an active state of sitting there,
Yes.
just becoming aware. Well, what do you feel? You can work in that way. Some people
Yeah.
got to go in this deep meditative state to get to know the guide, and actually, it's a very natural process. Really, it's
Mm.
just that shifting of consciousness. So there's many different ways, isn't there? And I think it's
Yeah.
finding what works for that individual, because we're all unique and
Exactly.
different, aren't we?
We are.
Excellent. Well, thoroughly enjoyed that. Thank you very much.
So did I. Thank you.
Hope you enjoy, everybody. And yes, please feel free to comment, and we'll see you in the next one. Thank you.